I'm here to give the undeniably best takes on what the best and worst anime of fall 2024 were. At the end, I'll crown one anime as the best of the season and another one as the worst of the worst.
Enough talk.
I wanted to give the do-over damsel conquers the dragon emperor a chance because of the strong case it made for itself in the first episode. Jill finds out about the forbidden romance between her fiance, the crown prince, and his sister, and being the unwitting tool of a war. With time turned back at the moment of her death, giving her another chance, I thought this might be a gem of an anime, which wasn't the case. The romance between Jill and Hades were creepy, and every time he pulled her into his lap, the more I found myself hating the show for its overemphasis on their relationship. There's an emotionally unstable 19-year-old in love with a 10-year-old on one side, sibling royalty love with a crazy goddess that's a spear on the other, and I'm just sitting there wanting both factions to lose. Into D tier. With Yakuza Fiance, one cannot point to a singular issue that makes it such a bad anime. There was a list of reasons. Many characters were initially portrayed one way, then the story acts like that wasn't the case. At first you think Yoshino was just this high schooler who wanted to distance herself from the Yakuza and instead got wrapped up in this marriage. And yet the show tells us her best friend is literally an organ harvester. And then we're supposed to be convinced that a high schooler can juggle getting amazing grades while torturing people in warehouses and his basement without ever worrying about repercussions. Finally, there was the dynamic between Yoshino and Kirishima. If she wanted to get revenge on him, why would she ever want to tell that person what she's trying to do? And he's no better, getting gratification from her degrading him. Everything in this anime is a distorted representation of life and trivializes topics for shock value, with the icing on the Yakuza Fiance cake being some of the worst animation in fall. This belongs in D tier. I've always wanted to go back and watch Ranma 1/2 as someone that's a huge Inuyasha fan since the two share the same mangaka, but the quality of the animation from its original airing didn't exactly age well in the modern era. Shocking, I know. With the remake, it got the upgrade it deserved while retaining its old school presentation. Older anime feel like the way they did layers is much more pronounced, whereas nowadays, characters standing out against the backdrop is more important than highlighting the setting they're in. A favorite moment of mine for Ranma 1/2 combining the best of both worlds is the times when Ranma and Akane are just walking along together between home and school, with the scenery improving the moment the two are sharing. The contents of the anime itself had an entertaining dynamic between our two main characters, from the chaos caused by Ranma's curse to their back and forth battle of who's the bigger tsundere. The most surprising thing to me was the ecchi elevating the story. I'm used to many of the anime with this genre being more interested in sexualizing a character. With Ranma 1/2, it never really felt like that was the case, and the comedy of the show was improved with its involvement. This is a solid B for me, with the only drawback being the clubs they'd end up fighting not resonating with me. I hadn't planned to watch Spirit Chronicles second season and said as much in my first impressions video. However, there's this rule I have where I give a show I may not have particularly enjoyed the previous seasons of, but it wasn't bad enough another chance, which sometimes is to my detriment. After finishing the second season, that would be the case here. Nothing redeemable to get me invested in future episodes. What's the point when Haruto's whole deal is supposed to be getting revenge and yet he's never actively progressing towards it? Every time the revenge progresses, it's completely unrelated to him making the active choice to chase it. It just falls into his lap. I feel it's unsatisfying for a main character to lack any agency in the plot, but the only thing it seems Haruto is doing is collecting his harem of little cutesy girls, I guess. The only massive change to the story is introducing more summoned heroes whose roles are immediately trivialized by Haruto being so powerful they get relegated to spectators. Oh, but don't worry, the hero Hirakai gets to blow up a wall with a big wave of water. Wow. Spirit Chronicles Season 2 is going into D tier, and latter seasons cannot convince me to return to watching. There was one anime of fall that I considered a dark horse, and that was Demon Lord 2099. The Demon Lord trope gave me some hesitancy since I've been burnt by the trope in the past, and I generally don't think it's a good idea to mix genres like was done here. I can happily say this lived up to my expectations, weaving a lively megalopolis setting with futuristic technology and fantasy elements. Many of the characters are endearing, bringing their own personalities to the story, and even though Veltol is strong, they aren't denied the opportunity to show off what they can do. Demon Lord 2099 is deserving of B tier. Goodbye Dragon Life was another unmemorable reincarnation fantasy to add to the list. Anime keeps trying to sell this overpowered main character trope, and 9 out of 10 times it misses the mark. Dolan is a reincarnated dragon that easily overcomes obstacles, with his only real concern being how much of his power he wants to risk exposing to his friends who might betray him. What would be a dire situation for other characters loses its impact, since we know they aren't truly in danger, and growth for someone like Dolan is severely lacking. And does the mangaka not know how cows produce milk? You know what? Never mind. I don't want to think about it anymore. Into D tier. With You Are Miss Servant, it's kinda just alright. Yuki goes from this emotionless train killer to a regular-ish girl going to school and has an obsession with katsuda sauce. All the other characters are there to help facilitate Yuki's transformation in a one-dimensional way that leaves them unmemorable. Sometimes it's fun, other times the episodes drag on for too long. So with that, I'll be placing it into C tier. Watching the gathering of the strong princess factions all in one place, and then transitioning from a political squabble to a city besieged by the archbishops and the witches' cult was an electrifying return to Re:Zero after 3 years. There was a lot of opportunity here for the growth of characters that have felt like we've not seen for years. Those said characters were also wrapped into the current plot neatly, as loose ends were tied up at the same time. The highlight was the actualization of Subaru's growth. The first season, his old self is broken down. In season 2, the process of building him back up is complete, and now in season 3, Subaru is someone trustworthy that doesn't have to die constantly to accomplish a task. Unfortunately, it wasn't all positive. This was an anime of the season where new episodes being released stopped, resulting in the airing experience being impacted. I'm going to place the blame on the decision to release the first episode as an hour and 30-minute long duration. In the past, I thought it was a good thing when anime did this, since there would be more time to build context. Now I'm not so convinced. Shows have to set the stage twice due to this, once for a long episode and again for the following series, so it's not as beneficial as you'd think at face value. Re:Zero season 3 is going into B tier. Don't kill me. After the brutal near-death experiences of Danmachi Season 4, the 5th season brought a much-needed breather from the terrors of the dungeon, with the shift in focus to a struggle of goddesses for Belle Crenel. With the journeys into the depths, the setting of Aurorio, its deities, and the usage of our mythology hasn't been as prevalent for quite some time, but it was exactly the type of arc I hoped for. Freya and her familia's complete disregard for the rules placed on them, and the psychological battle Belle faced with Freya was an excellent escalation to the season's finale. The usage of mythology by combining the Norse god Freya and Aphrodite's role as the goddess of love gives us an interesting plot device for her rivalry with Hestia by pulling from the Homeric hymns. I've always been a fan of mythologies, with the likes of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, as well as the heroes of Olympus being an early obsession of mine. Hestia is largely ignored despite being one of the 12 Olympians, and has been a mediocre character in Danmachi, so seeing her have meaningful impact on the story was a satisfying change to the norm. My only negative takeaway for this anime would be in regard to the episode delays. When watching something as it's airing, interest gradually builds up, but a delay brings it all to a halt or can even tank it. Fortunately, most of what's possible to point out during fall did air, so judging it off of that, Danmachi Season 5 belongs in A tier. I don't think it's wrong to say the second season of Shangri-La Frontier took some time to get itself going. We had the meetings of guilds and the introduction of characters like Rust and Akitsukane to build up the Colossi plot. This takes time and isn't as engaging as the Weatherman fight. Once we got past it, I was back to anticipating every new episode like I had with the previous season, and it seems like the animation quality was improved on itself, which is always a plus. Also, I'm glad Saiger Zira's character was expanded upon further so we know more about her motives and why players in Shangri-La Frontier hold her in such high regard or fear her. I hope in the latter half of the season we'll get more insight into the developers' goals with the Colossi for this world-leveling concept. This was an A tier experience for me. A person who is talented but never puts in effort will never develop, and someone that works hard without talent will eventually plateau. Where hard work and talent intersect, success follows, and that's the idea the most notorious talker runs the world's greatest clan seeks to convey. Throughout Noelle's journey, we see characters lacking one of those traits, bringing down those around them, the jealousy that comes from feeling inferior, and what it takes to succeed as a seeker. I did find the anime cringy at times when it tried too hard to sell Noelle's intelligence, but in general, I was just glad to watch a fantasy about adventurers who cared about party dynamics instead of one strong individual. Since the talker class isn't about brute forcing obstacles, the other characters get to bring something of value to the clan. A solid choice for C tier that deserves more love. As we've watched more anime and gotten older, it's become much harder to relate to romances where the characters are in middle to high school. 365 Days Till the Wedding is a light-hearted and fun romance for those of us getting ready to get in our coffins. The dichotomy between Honjoji and Oharu's work life truly defined this anime, whether this was due to their hobbies or their unconventional yet budding relationship. With other romances that fit into the subgenre, it's common for these to not be the case, opting to lean heavier into one setting and make the viewer wonder why the office setting was even introduced if it was going to be forgotten. It was also refreshing to see the relationship dynamic get to play out, instead of what seems to be common these days of the 12th episode slideshow of them being a couple. 365 Days Till the Wedding is at the top of C tier. If the shadowy collar that brought zero value to the anime had been left out and there had been slightly more substance, B would have been where this landed. Sword Art Online Alternative Gun Gale Online 2 was more of the battle royale experience from the first season with some different party dynamics. It's a decent watch with cool fights, but doesn't do anything to draw me into watching the same thing twice. D tier. I said it during my first impressions, but I'll say it here again. Dandadan feels like a story like Mob Psycho and it takes place in the same universe. Colorful animation with bizarre moments created by its supernatural elements. Not to sound like too much of a hater, but the biggest flaw for me with Mob Psycho was how limited the cast felt and how small their roles were compared to Mob. Dandadan already has a wide variety of personalities, from our main character duo to Momo's granny, Ira and Gigi, who have all stepped up to enhance the story. I look forward to seeing more of how the characters will grow and develop, as well as what sort of supernatural situations they'll fall into. The only negative I have with this anime is not knowing anything about Akaru's family, so I'd like to see this expanded upon in the future. Dandadan was A tier. Loner Life in Another World is a cliche isekai where the main character gets supposedly weak powers, and that turns out not to be the case. There wasn't anything positive or negative to make this stand out amongst the other anime this season, making it forgettable and worthy of D tier. I can say I enjoyed Let This Grieving Soul Retire as long as I didn't think for too long about the substance of the anime, and when I did, the entire thing shattered. From the title and the first couple of episodes, you'd think Cry would be more invested in retiring from being a hunter, or at least take steps towards that. Pretty much retiring is never brought up again, since the show is more invested in showing him collecting relics. If Cry is so powerful from said relics, despite how powerless he is, wouldn't it make sense we'd see other characters utilizing them as well? This goes into C tier. Orb on the movements of the earth is like seeing a representation of humanity coming together over the ages to complete one goal. It's amazing to consider that people willingly risk their lives in religious eternal damnation so that we of the future could know the truth about Earth's place in the universe, and how objects orbit in the solar system, which many of us likely take for granted. How we view why other people do something shouldn't be from the viewpoint of purely good or bad. Things more often than not are complex, and an important thing this anime showcases. Someone like Badani is not altruistically working to perfect the heliocentric model and ends up being one of many who risk their lives to finalize it, despite viewpoints he held on the sharing of information and his aversion to working with others. I'm proud of us as a species when we collaborate, and with a whole other half left of the season airing this winter, I can't wait to finish it. Orb on the Movements of the Earth is going into B tier. Uzumaki was teased 5 years ago, and after so much time, many expected a masterpiece that showed one of Junji Ito's best works in all its horrific and disturbing glory. What we got instead was at best average, and at worst visual garbage due to poor quality of animation instead of the contents itself being bad. This was a disappointment because there'd be these moments where a scene almost pulls you in with its visceral horror just for the animation to push you away. I was fascinated with the contents of Uzumaki due to how the town changed from the Curse of the Spiral. seeing whether a person's morality or their body would break down first, and if it was possible to escape the pull to the center. It's insane to me that with 4 30-minute episodes, they dropped the ball this badly, but I'm not caught by surprise. With Junji Ito's other heavy-hitting manga, Tomi and Gyo, not being well received and criticized for not being well animated either, this set the stage for me to have little hope. The blame doesn't lie with the stylistic choice for it to be black and white. I blame those entrusted with the adaptation. With great sadness, I'll be placing Uzumaki into D tier. Bleach, Thousand Year Blood War arc, The Conflict, has been a continuation of everything I want a shonen to be. You can see why the Quincy's would seek vengeance for the wrongdoings of the Soul Society, even if the extent Yuhaba is willing to go to seem extreme. The Soul Society's objective of stopping the collapse of reality can come across as morally righteous. However, there's so many motives behind the characters that it doesn't feel one-dimensional. Other shonen, the villains come across as cringy or motivated by things you don't sympathize or relate to. The protagonists are these unapproachable paragons of good that do the right thing. I don't want these characters to be preachy people. And with Bleach, there are many examples on each side of the conflict, from the captain of the first division to Boss B, where this doesn't happen. Plus the anime looks great. Bleach Thousand Year Blood War arc, The Conflict, goes into A tier. Now that everything has been rated on the tier list, the moment we've all been waiting for. What will be the best and worst anime of fall? There are great arguments that can be made for the anime in A tier. However, I just have to give it to what I enjoyed the most. Bleach was that full package. From an engaging plot to a living, breathing cast and insane fights that nothing else in the season can compete with. Kyoraku vs. Lille didn't have a close comparison, and that's why Bleach is going into S tier to be crowned the best of fall. D tier, on the other hand, is filled with garbage, but one anime stands out as the worst of fall. Yakuza Fiancé is different from the rest by selling an experience it couldn't deliver on. I may have lost interest in something like Spirit Chronicles, but it didn't betray itself. And then to see the horrible take where people were saying this is such a realistic depiction of Yakuza, and Yoshino is such a strong depiction of a female lead, gets my blood boiling. I guess some of you are so shonen brained you don't know what a well-written female is supposed to look like. Yakuza Fiancé is going into F tier as the worst anime of fall 2024. And that's the end. I definitely slacked on getting this out promptly, but it's out in the end. Let me know the takes you hated or agreed with, and with that, I'll see you in the next one.